I am Malcolm Weaver, and we're in Center, Texas at Town and Country Real Estate offices. And in attendance here is Pam Phelps, Buster Bounds, and my son Mark Weaver. Buster Bounds I want to give credit to for taping this and for taping two other segments of things that happened in Center and Shelby County. We first taped the poultry industry and told the story of that. And then we taped the Hallmark cards and told the story of how that came to Center. And this particular one is going to be based upon Atlas Plywood, which today is Triangle Pacific. These are just things that, because of my age, and I was back there and I went through these things, I can remember a lot about them, and I want to put some of those memories down so that other generations will know what we did and how we did it to a certain extent. But I want to be sure that everyone understands that of all three of these that we have done, there were a lot of people involved, and it's nearly impossible to name all those people. After all, that's about 45, 50 years ago. And but we did things that had to be done for Center and Shelby County, because at the time this county was economically distraught. We were at hanging on to the edge of the rope. We had no economy. The war was over, and all the young people had moved to the cities and in the armies, and nothing left here but old people. And we couldn't make enough money to support the county and keep it going and make it progressive. So we got together and did some things, mostly because of the urging of John Mooseburg in the poultry industry, which today is a fantastic industry for this county. And we got the Hallmark cards plant going. It started out as a tomato shed, you recall. And I'm going to tell a little about the story about how Atlas Plywood got started, which today is Triangle Pacific. I'm going to mention some names later on in this talk, but I will, I'm sure I won't mention all of them, because mostly because I don't remember all of them. But it's hard to remember all of those specifics and details that happened back there at that time. But in this atmosphere that we were living in Shelby County of, we didn't have any income sources. The leadership of the county got together and said, look, we have got to do something, and we have got to do something now. And we started, and we tried a lot of things, and a lot of them did not work, but some of them did, and we're getting the rewards and the fruits of those that did. But one of those was a plywood plant that was called originally Atlas Plywood. It was owned by a group in the state of Massachusetts. It was the second plywood plant in Texas. There was one in Conroe that was already up and going. A group of us went down there and looked at that to see what we were going to get in Center and see what we could, were shooting for. So a plywood plant that would make strictly hardwood was just fantastic for us, because we had no market for hardwood lumber. There was a tremendous market for pine, but we cut all our pine out for the war effort, and there was nothing immediately ready for saw logs, you might say. But hardwood timber, we had an abundance of it, and it was a great thing to give some value to standing hardwood and to the owners of the hardwood trees. today, I believe I'm correct in this, that grade A hardwood logs are shipped in here from as far away as Arkansas. A grade A hardwood log is a prime log. It's worth a lot of money, and we have to go out a long ways to get them. That is, Atlas Plywood does. Since it was originally named Atlas Plywood, it has had 2 or 3 other names, but currently and presently today it is named Triangle Pacific. The man who came here and whom we interviewed for this industry was a man named Frank Harney, and he was from Boston. And if there ever was a man that had a Boston accent, he had it. I'm not sure about this, but I think this lead came to us from Southwest Electric Power Company that they were looking for a place. Well, we finally got Mr. Frank Harney to come here and look. And we told him to tell us what he wanted and we'd get it for him. And as conference after conference went on, and he'd fly back and report to his superiors in Massachusetts and fly back down here. And he made several trips down here. And each one we got a little bit farther along. And we were just really excited about getting this plywood mill, which would start off with about less than 100 people. We had to go through a lot of conferences and demands of them, and one of the demands was that we had to raise $100,000, if my memory's right. Well, $100,000 was like $1 million today. That was back yonder. This started in the late 40s or maybe the early 50s. I don't remember exactly which, but long back in there. And we had trouble. Part of the requirements we had to meet was raising this $100,000. Well, we started a program throughout the county to raise $100,000, and we scraped every barrel and scraped everybody's pocketbook and everything else, and we didn't raise. We like $6,000 of having $100,000. Of course, now some of our good citizens here can raise $100,000 on the telephone. But back in those days, no one had any money. There was no money. All the money had wound up in the East, and everybody in the rest of the United States was starving to death. But anyhow, we started this program and raised this money, and we got up to, we like $6,000. And I had a friend here that was a barber named Merville Adams. And Merville was a good friend of mine, and I was over there getting a haircut one day, and he said, have you got all that money raised? I said, no, we don't. I said, we're like $6,000. I said, we've hit up everybody that's got 4 bits in the bank and everything else. And he asked me a few questions. He said, I think I can get it for you. I said, well, by God, if you can, we need it. And he called me about a week later and said, come over here. He asked me a bunch of questions about what the money was going for and all that kind of stuff. He said, I got you $6,000. And he handed me a sack with $6,000 in it. It had dollar bills in it, $5 bills, $20 bills. I said, Merville, where did you get this money? He said, I went out and got it from the poor people of this county that wanted to see this happen, and said there was a lot of dollar bills in there. That's all they could put in, but said, I raised $6,000. Well, I got in touch with the power structure then and told them we had the $6,000. There was great jubilation, and we patted Merville on the back and that sort of thing, and I'm patting him on the back now because he was kind of the sort of the last resort. We formed an organization called the Center Development Foundation to do these things that we had to do to make this happen, to get that industry here and make it happen. And we went out here and bought a tract of land that Triangle Pacific is presently sitting on, and we bought additional land, about 30 more acres back in behind it. Well, Triangle Pacific took about 12, 15 acres the first time, and over the years, the different ownerships that we had before it got to Triangle Pacific, they would expand and they would need more money. And Jack Motley was chairman of the Center Development Foundation, and he negotiated a deal with them and sell them an extra 10 acres or something. Well, over the years, they bought off all the land that we had. That was land we had for future industrial development, and it so happened that Atlas Plywood and Triangle Pacific and their predecessors in between bought all of that land, and today that whole subdivision that we had out there is owned by Triangle Pacific. Today, the city of Center does not have an industrial foundation. If we could have an industrial foundation back yonder 50 years ago, I don't see any reason why we can't have one today. And I'm saying this to the leadership of the community: get off your chair and get us an industrial foundation in Center, Texas, like we can offer some things to some other people. This community is blessed with the industry that it has for a community this size. 5,800 people, and we have probably 4,000 industrial jobs in this town. And that's fantastic. They don't have that many in Nacogdoches. They don't have that many in Lufkin. So anyhow, that was done nearly 50 years ago, and I want to needle the present leadership of this community to bring in something else. We need some more industry. That we don't want to get all our eggs in one basket, and we've got a lot of wonderful opportunities, maybe satellite industries from some that are already here. And we've been sitting back here enjoying the fruits of those labors, and we need to start some more things for this county and make it bigger and better and more economically secure. I want to say something about Jack Motley. I've said that in two or three of those other two things, I think, but Jack was the president of Farmer State Bank, and he was kind of the bell cow. He was the man that could make the decisions and pick up the phone and get something done and furnish the money if we had it. And we have a lot of things in this town that we wouldn't have today if it hadn't been for Jack Motley. I'm not saying Jack Motley was the only one. I'm just saying that he furnished the top leadership for all of us to make things happen. Let me see, I made some notes here, and you got to forgive me and let me look at my notes so I won't forget something. Oh yeah, we, in this whole time at Triangle Pacific and Atlas Plywood and all of them have been out there, there's only been one labor strike. And we had a labor strike back there, and they had picket lines out there and that sort of thing, and emotions were pretty high. And an official from Massachusetts and the head of the labor union got together, and they came to us and said, look, we want to settle this strike and we want to stop it. It's not necessary. We can get along fine without it and all that kind of stuff. So the power structure of Center backed off and the strike was settled, and there was no, before it became so emotional that it became violent and that sort of thing. And they've had peaceful labor relationships out there ever since. I want to say something about some of the people that were highly involved in this. And one of them was Bubba Cowser. Bubba gave yeoman service to everything. He was a great leader and a good man and a convincing man when he got his made his mind up to do something. Frank Parker was great, made great contributions to this program, and he became great friends to Frank Harney, and he made tremendous strides in making this thing happen. Dr. L.S. Oates Sr. He was became very good friends of Frank Harney, and when Frank Harney on one of his excursions down here, he had to fly out of Houston to go back, and Dr. Oates and I took him to Houston, and he told us down there that he was going to make the recommendation that Center get this plant and that sort of thing. But let me see. I mentioned all the others, but that pretty well gets it. Let's see. I can't think of anything else except we just had wonderful relations with Triangle Pacific. They've been a great citizen of this county. They've made wonderful contributions to employment structure of the county. They've provided jobs, and yes, they're not $10 an hour jobs, but that's all right. They're jobs, and there are a lot of people out there that need just jobs, and there are a lot of people that work out there and have spent their lifetime working out there. I know people that worked out there so long that they've retired out there. And it's been a wonderful asset to Center, Texas, and I hope I can make one more of these talks, and I'm going to make this next one on the Depression, I think, and tell some things that went on in the Depression. I want to thank you for listening to me. I'm sorry for my rambling and for having to take my notes, but after all, I've got a little years on me, and sometimes it's hard for me to remember specifics and details. I thank you very much.
How was Bubba Cowser involved, and what was his real name?
You know, I knew his real name, but that's 50 years ago. Guy Cowser. And Bubba Cowser was involved in everything. He ran the Coca-Cola plant here, and he could walk out when he wanted to, and he could get things done when he wanted to, and he would do it. He was a mover and a shaker, just like Jack Motley. The others on that Center Development Foundation were Prentice Sanders and Man Pinkston and Heber Parker and Jack and me, I believe it was. And when we had something that we wanted to raise money to do it, we'd get out and raise it. And you had to raise money back in those days. Well, you have to do the same thing today. It takes people with leadership qualities to give of their time and their talents and their money to make these things happen. And your community is going to progress in proportion to that kind of leadership, and you have to have it. You just look around at all these the communities around us that have progressed. Look at Longview. Perfect example. Tyler, Lufkin, Magnochia's has done a great job. All right, any other question?
Did the foundation members put money or sign notes, or was it just sweat and inspiration?
I believe that we signed some notes. We had the authority to do that. Not many of them though, because we raised the money. We didn't we didn't want to sign notes, but we raised most of the money. We just go around and beat on people with an axe handle until they gave us money, and that's the way we did it. Did it the hard way, just like I told in one of those other programs how we got this motel down here. And a man in Dallas told us, "What the hell are you doing up here asking me to put money in Center, Texas in a motel when you won't do it yourself?" And we got thinking about that on the way, and we made it up, and we're gonna build a hotel ourselves. And we raised the money, and that's what we did. We raised the money and built that hotel down there, and Bubba Cowser ran it. He retired, and he became the big cheese down there. He kept the books, and he did everything, and we paid off all the indebtedness. And you know, back yonder years ago, that's how the Poly Hotel was built. By people bought bonds. O.H. Poly, whom we all know, has passed now, but his father was probably one of the best entrepreneurs that this county's ever produced.
What was his name?
O.H. Poly.
So,
the father. He was a senior.
what was the strike about, and what year was it?
Oh, I don't know. The strike was.
About money?
I don't know the particulars. Community got involved at the request of management, and there was some pretty rough things that were said and done, but it wasn't like the one that we had with Dennison, Poultry and Egg. It was a vicious, mean strike. But this one didn't go that far. It was settled by management and ownership and the leaders of the trade union.
About what year was it?
Gosh, I don't remember that.
What about the Dennison poultry strike? What year was it?
I don't remember that. It was all about the same time, but that Dennison Poultry and Egg strike is a program by itself. We don't really want to talk about that. It was a sad day for Center. At the time, it was the oldest strike that ever been in the state of Texas. And it was so sad because you'd have a mother walking the picket line and a daughter or son crossing it, or a husband crossing it, that sort of thing. It was sad. Sad. I'd really rather not talk about it. I know all about it. I mean, I was right here when it all happened, but.
Was it about money?
Yes.
Paycheck?
Yes. And the Dennison Poultry and Egg was run by Ray Clymer at that time. And a lot of people in Center remember Ray. But anyhow, that's about all I've got to say, Buster. If you've got anything else you want to...
I got a question for you.
All right.
The Triangle plant, was Center in competition with another city or cities?
Yes.
The plant?
Yes.
Who?
We don't know.
In this region or all across the southeast?
I think it was in the Texas region, the timber belt of Texas. It was comparatively untouched. I mean, there were hardwood trees here 150 years old because there was no demand for them. I've seen people cut a walnut tree down and make a fence post out of it. That's the most expensive wood in the world. And but there was you couldn't, you couldn't. There's no place to sell it. And walnut trees grow wild in this county. Well, if you people don't have any more questions, I'll call it a day. Thank you.